Dark and Light, a game that had a lot of people watching it after its fantasy element design of an open world with spells and NPCs and survival crafting elements. People were watching this game intently because it was part of a genre that a lot of people like, yet it expanded on it by a lot, apparently. Yet, on day one it came out to mostly negative reviews. Yet, on day two, those mostly negative reviews then turned to mixed, which is where it currently sits now in Steam. So, what happened with Dark Light, and is it worth your time? I'm Guns, and today we're going to go over the good, bad, the ugly of Dark Light, everything that's wrong with it, everything that's right with it, and everything that will never be right with it that is part of the game, and that they really should change, but probably won't, because it's a core gameplay mechanic. So first off, I want to talk about how absurdly long this loading screen is. And by the way, I want you guys to know while you're watching this is sped up by a factor of 4, and this is maybe a half of the time at the most that I was sitting here watching this. The load times for this game, while there is only one load time, it's like literally a 5 to 10 minute load time. It's absurd. It is absurd. Now, before we start with the good, I think we should actually get the elephant out of the room, and that is a lot of people are comparing this game to Ark. Now, why are they comparing this game to Ark? Well, apparently Farland Entertainment owns both Wildcard Studios and Snail Games. Snail Games is a Chinese developer, Wildcard, I believe, is a European developer. Farland Studios took the engine that Wildcard Studios is using for Ark and gave it to Snail Games. Snail Games also used multiple assets from Ark as placeholders for Dark and Light. So there are a lot of assets that are currently placeholders until they have their own assets filled in with it later on down the road. We hope. They haven't actually given us any clarification on this, but that's usually what most developers do, and to be honest with you, that's what smart developers would do. You would want to fill in as many missing assets as you have with whatever assets are out there, and if a studio like Wildcard is willing to give you some of their assets for you to use so you can fill in a bunch of gaps until you have your own content in there, honestly, that's not a bad thing, and it makes for a more complete experience playing the game instead of us having these massive holes like a half-assed UI and a lot of missing sounds and missing textures or just this default round texture until something's put there. So to be honest, it's better this way, trust me. So the good. First off, this game has amazing render distance, an amazing art style, an amazing view distance and a draw distance, an amazing sense of place. This game looks gorgeous. This game looks nothing like Ark. For those of you wondering, want to compare it directly to Ark, oh, this is just like a fantasy rip-off Ark. No, it's better than Ark. Better than Ark. 2 reasons. 1, it's $30. It's half the price of Ark. 2, there is still taming, there is still leveling, but there's also magic and fantasy and elves and dwarves and NPCs and quest lines and cities that actually have other NPCs moving about and doing things and establishments for you to go to. This has so much more to this game. It's great. The exploration is great. There's diverse biomes that change. There's lava, swamps, mountainous terrain, everything like that. They have not interesting NPCs, but this is the first time a game like this is really taking a crack at having NPCs that have quests and dialogue, and there's actually traders that you can sell stuff to for gold and currency, and this currency is used for a few things currently in the game, but the fact that they have a currency set up right now means that they can expand on this massively later on down the road, and honestly, that's going to be really interesting if they use it, and I hope they do. The skill system is wonderful, so let's look at survival, alright? So if you have survival skills, let's say you want survival skill 7. Well, you have to be level 45 first. Okay, so get to level 45. How do you get survival skill 7? Well, it'll tell you certain things you need to do, such as gathering hay, or straw in that matter, or gathering wood, or creating different things, or fighting different things. Basically, every single skill has a set number of things that you need to do in order to level it up. And it's not always the same. It can be something like killing a certain type of creature, or crafting a certain type of spell, or using a certain type of spell, or gathering something while under the influence of something. Some of the descriptions are missing currently and don't tell you exactly what it is, so there is a little bit of mystery to it. Now, leveling up the skill does not take nearly as long as actually leveling up your character. So the grind is in leveling up your character from like 1 to 45. For instance, survival rank 45 gets you a hang glider. Getting from survival 1 to 7, though, doesn't actually take that long. Gaining a level in survival takes about 5 minutes in total. I would say gaining a rank of survival 7 might take you 30 to 40 minutes in total of doing the activity that you need to do. So it's relatively easy. And this skill system works with survivalism, melee combat, ranged combat, armor, tailoring, light magic, dark magic, earth magic, water magic, fire. I mean, it works bestiary, thaumaturgy, alchemy. It's everything in the game. And it's actually a really good system because it makes you feel like you're constantly making progress towards something and you're constantly feeling good about what you and your character are doing. This is obviously, honestly, this is an ingenious system that they have here. And this is the first leveling system that I actually like because you can do everything, but you can also specialize if you want to. But the fact that you can do everything, you just have to work at a little bit, is really, really nice. And I really appreciate the system. I think this is possibly the most underrated feature of this game here. The crafting itself is actually a really nice system as well. So, let me give you an example. I have a fireplace here, okay? And in this fireplace, I'm cooking steak. Now, I want to take some grass, and I dry grass in the fireplace to make straw. Well, normally I would queue up the items to make straw, and then I would wait until the meat's cooking, and then it would make straw. Well, not in this game, no. It can cook and make straw at the same time. Basically, it uses logic. You can't cook 4 or 5 things at once. I think you might be able to cook 2 things at once, but if you're using a system, like the fireplace is the best example here. If you're using something like the fireplace and you want to dry the grass out, drying the grass out doesn't necessarily use the same parts as the fire as cooking something. You can cook something and dry grass out at the same time. The same applies to workbenches. If, logically, these 2 actions you would be doing on this workbench do not require the same thing, then they can be both done at the same time. And this makes crafting sped up on workbenches and magical altars and things like that. And it's really, really nice and quick and efficient, and I really like that. There is a 2 hotbar setup. Now, at first I kind of didn't like this because I alt-tab in and out a lot, going from, you know, my stream to my email to the turning recordings on and off, adjusting volume, stuff like that. But once I got used to it, I actually really like this setup. So this 2 hotbar setup means you can have up to, I think it's 22 items on your hotbar at any time, and you can swap between the set of 11 at any time by pressing Alt. And it's actually 10, 11, 12. Oh, so it's 24 items in total. It's not, yeah, I just counted on my keyboard because I was thinking 1 through minus key, but it's actually 1 through equal sign. So it's 24 in total. Now, how I do it is I actually have one set up for combat, and I have the other one set up for crafting and gathering and making buildings and things like that. So I switch to my combat one when I'm in combat, and I never have to worry about like accidentally placing down a house like, oh no, I'm building this house and I mean to be attacking this griffin. Ah! And it's nice, it works. It's really, really good, and it's really, really nice. And you can have actually all 24 slots filled with spells if for some reason you wanted to run like every single spell under existence and just like, you know, like it's got a lot of usability here. And this is one of the better features that they have set up that games like this need. I would actually like it if they had 3 and I could like control up and down on the keyboard or something somewhere, like control page up, page down to switch between 3 or 4 or 5 for that matter, so that way I could like start itemizing my stuff and everything, because I'm that kind of OCD person. But I'll take 2, it's a step in the right direction. And lastly, the combat. Now the combat has some good points, but it also has some bad points, which is going to lead us into our bad of the good, bad, and the ugly. So the combat is varied. You have swords, staves, throwing knives, bows, crossbows, magical spells, ruins that give you effects and buffs, and on and on and on and on and on. There's a bunch of stuff you can actually do with combat, and it's really quite inventive. So there's no staleness in combat, and it's certainly a lot better than Ark's combat, which usually just revolves around a gun or some bolas and a sword and a shield. Like, there's not a lot there creativeness wise for Ark, and this game has so much creativeness in its combat. It's really, really nice. Like, there's combos you can think up with spells and how to alternate between them and use them with offhand items and shields and swords, and you run out of mana, and there's actually a lot of depth to this combat here. But this is going to lead us into the bad, which is that combat can be frustrating sometimes because a lot of creatures have hitboxes that are a third the size of their body, yet their hitbox for their attack is twice the size of themselves. It gets worse when the AI in this game seems borderline retarded at times, and the de-aggro range seems infinite. Now, the aggro range is a little bit large in my opinion, and it doesn't scale down with the higher level you are. You never get to a point where anything's like, I should leave him alone, he's kind of scary. You never get to that point with anything, which sucks. You also can't seem to outrun anything. I've tried outrunning creatures. I just can't do it. Like, I've gotten a huge lead on them down a mountain all the way through, and like I'm miles and miles ahead of them, and they still aggro to me. I've had something chase me all the way inside a city before when I was way, way ahead of it. So the fact that there's no de-aggro range is also extremely annoying, because you basically have to kill everything you run into or die to it, which becomes limiting to your exploration as a whole, as you can't just kind of avoid things. You constantly have to actually engage things, and that sucks. Another gameplay issue, and we're just going to go through a few of them really quickly here, because there's actually a lot of gameplay issues. You can't run off like more than a 30-degree incline, and this isn't like, oh, this is a hill a player is not supposed to go up of. I'm talking about this is a road that was clearly designed for a player to walk up this road, but it's at a 30-degree incline, and your character physically cannot go up it. You just slide off the hill. You randomly get stuck on flat surfaces. We've talked about the combat issues and the hitboxes and how they seem random and sporadic. There's equipment and equipping item issues where you'll equip something and it'll automatically unequip itself and put itself back in your inventory. And this will happen multiple times, and it'll happen while you're in the middle of combat, while you're trying to equip the weapon or a spell, and it just constantly goes back into your inventory, and it is insanely frustrating. There are collision issues where you'll be standing on an invisible barrier, or you'll be sunk halfway into a rock. There's spawning issues where you'll die and respawn back at your base, and half your base has not spawned in, which causes you initially to freak out because you feel like it's been destroyed, but when you die and then wait for a 3-minute retimer and then respawn, it turns out your base is fine. There's really bad UI feedback overall, how some things reflect that one thing has happened when nothing has happened. And the gathering, this is another huge pet peeve of mine. Either it is bad server stability and performance and network lag, and when I say bad, I mean atrociously bad, absolutely terrible. You can stand in front of something and hit it 40 times and nothing happens. Or gathering has RNG attached to it. And if gathering has RNG attached to it, that is the most borderline, stupid, retarded, absolutely moronic game design decision I have ever encountered. Gathering is something everybody hates, but sometimes it necessitates what you need to move forward in a game, which is understandable. Citadel was one of the first games, Citadel Forged in Fire, which by the way we're going to talk about later on. I do have a video coming up on that. Citadel Forged in Fire is pretty much the only game that has made gathering as simplistic as possible, and every single game like this needs to make gathering as simplistic as possible, because nobody actually enjoys gathering. Nobody! And if they do, you belong in a mental asylum. And currently, unless it is terribly bad network lag, latency, or just bad hitboxes, gathering appears to have RNG attached to it. You can smack a tree 40 times for logs and get absolutely nothing 40 times in a row. It's literally happened to me before. I've broken an axe on a tree and gotten absolutely nothing out of the tree. Now, supposedly it gets better when you get better tools. However, you do not get better tools for this kind of gathering until level 24. You're bearing on mid-game there. That's 12 to 15 hours of gameplay. That's ridiculous. And lastly, the ugly of this game. The performance issues. The frame rate. God. So, the frame rate is somewhere between 8 FPS and 50 FPS, depending whether or not you're looking at a certain something at that time, or you have your inventory open, or the game is hitching at the moment. So this game has an incestuant problem with hitching, where it constantly hitches, constantly hitches, constantly hitches. Like, it's like every 5 or 10 minutes where you'll literally be stuck on 1 FPS. And the game appears to lock up for... The longest I've seen this happen to me was about a minute and a half. And I was just like, I'll give it a second. I was in the middle of something important, a fight. And I came out, and the game was fine afterwards. After a minute and a half, it was stuck on this one screen, one frame. And then it went back to normal, and I was dead, of course, and then I had to make a run for my body, and I lost everything that I had on. But that hitching is constant. There's massive server latency and performance issues, where it's especially noticeable when playing with friends. When I was playing with Azid, I would see him beside me, and, oh, give it 5 or 10 seconds, he would then be on the other side of the city, barely in visible range. Like, just absurd latency issues, and then he wouldn't move for another, 4 or 5 minutes, and then he'd be somewhere else on the other side of the map. Like, it's insane. The frame rate, not stable at the latest. Changing, settings does not help performance at all. Not even a little bit. I tried it on the lowest settings. I tried it on the highest settings. I tried a combination of everything here and then. Nothing helped the frame rate whatsoever. Unfortunately, the game does have a little bit of fuzziness to it, and I'm not sure if it's from the anti-aliasing or the post-processing, but I can't seem to disable it. Honestly, some of the graphic options seem to do nothing sometimes, which is seriously like, excuse me, what? I couldn't get it to go away, the fuzziness, and it kind of hurts my eyes a little bit because I feel like I have to strain to look at certain things. Not to mention, lastly, and I think this is something they're just not going to change, this is the real ugliness to it, the memory usage. I run an i7-5820K with a GTX 1080 Ti, 16 gigs of DDR4. Most of my games that I play on a regular basis, like this one, are on a SSD. This game was using 8.5 gigs of DDR4 memory. 8.5 gigs. Now, my PC is a bit of a beast, okay? Most people's PCs is not. Most people cannot run this kind of stuff. It costs too much. You know, people have to live, okay? And the fact that I can run this at this state, I can't, like, it is, for other people, this is going to be a completely unplayable game. I don't know if this problem is inherent to this engine, because Arc has the exact same kind of issue, and they use the exact same engine. It may be a problem that's inherent to the engine, and if it is, it's just a bad engine that they need to get rid of if that's the case, and build it up from the ground up, because engines should be able to run well and not tax the system. That's the whole point of the engine, is to run as well as possible and not tax the system heavily while giving developers as many options as possible. That's the whole point of the engine. This engine does not accomplish that. That memory usage will kill this game for many people, and that is why at $30, while there is a lot of good to this game, I cannot recommend it, because I cannot tell you their minimum system requirements may be complete bullshit, may be completely made up, to be honest with you. Because here I am sitting on this beast of a rig, and I have a lot of issues running this game. So I cannot say with confidence that their minimum system requirements, you'd be able to run it on that, because to me it just doesn't make sense when I'm sitting on this, and I can't run this game for anything. Their optimization is absolutely terrible, their memory usage is terrible, frame rate's terrible, performance is terrible, network lag, server lag. It's all bad. It's bad enough to be annoying pretty consistently every 5 minutes or so. This game has a lot of promise, and it could do a lot of good, but they have to get these kinds of performance issues sorted out immediately. If they do that, this game might turn out to be one of the better games in terms of a survival type of open world game we've seen in quite a long time. If it doesn't do that, this game will never be worth your $30. That being said, when I do have fun with this game, I have a lot of fun. I have a lot of fun, and it's easy enough to overlook a lot of those issues with all the fun that's being had within the game. But I can't actually promise you'll even be able to run this thing when, you know, I'm not streaming, I'm not recording, I'm not doing anything, and it's like, we're using half of your memory. Jesus Christ, that's usually all some people have in their gaming rig. Anyway, guys, I'm Guns. That's my thoughts on Dark and Light. Currently, is it worth your $30? No. Give it a couple of months, ask people that are still playing it, see what they say. Maybe it will be then once they patch out some issues. Until then, keep your eye on it. I'm Guns. We're going to have a video coming up on Citadel and Next Day Survival here in the next coming days. 2 games that I am both very interested in and very excited for. I'll see you guys later. GG.